Today we're making one of my favorite cured meats, biltong. More precisely, duck biltong, one of the best-selling and most sought-after charcuterie we produced lately along with my famous beef biltong recipe. Link in description. It's silly simple to make, and today I take a home cook approach, exploring various drying methods without the need for biltong boxes or fancy dryers. Plus, we'll address common queries about humidity, mold and storage. Let's start with a nice pair of duck boobies. You'll most likely find duck breast sold in packages like this, which is the easy and convenient option. They are most likely farmed, but if you're lucky enough to find wild duck, then by all means use that. Before we cure it, we need to prune it up. Give it a rinse under cold water, then pat it dry with paper towel. Next up, we need to get rid of the feathers. Don't do it with a blowtorch, and here's why. It doesn't do anything apart from make your house smell like burnt feathers. It's better to use your wife's tweezers for their intended purpose. Plucking out feathers, of course. Now we have ourselves some nice hairless breasts. Next I want a nice sharp knife to do the trimming. Start by removing any excess fat. We leave the fat cap on, that's where the flavor lives. Now duck breasts might come with a tender or the fillet still attached to the breast or might not. Point is, you want to remove it as it won't allow for proper curing and drying if you leave it on. There's going to be quite a few little pieces of silver skin you need to carefully remove by running your blade underneath it. All the trimmings go into the freezer for making duck fat, broths or whatever in the future. Or so you can throw it away in 5 years from now. You should end up with a nice, clean and uniformly looking duck breast once done. Once they're all looking adequate, you get them into a container and weigh them. This is for precision, but by all means eyeball it. I already know half of the people watching this probably never even owned scales, but nonetheless, here's how to technically make it correctly. Hopefully you make a note of the weight, and then lay them down on a bed of roses, while you sleep on a bed of nails. Otherwise, simply a plastic or non-reactive metal container. Let's look at the correct salt to use. Here we have 3 common salts. 2 types are suitable, 1 is not. Firstly, we have fine table salt, the kind you find in those horrible shakers standing on the table in cheap restaurants. Next we have coarse ground rock salt. And finally, we have coarse ground sea salt. Rock salt and sea salt are both fine. Table salt is a big no-no. Stay away from it and only sniff it when eyeballing tequilas. Next we salt the duck. We use 6% to the weight of the meat, in this case 93 grams. You can of course eyeball it, just do it at your own risk. Salt it evenly, making sure to give it a nice rub while doing so. It's important that your boobies are not too tightly packed, otherwise it won't cure properly. We leave them skin down to cure for 30 minutes. Meanwhile, we sort out the spices, the most important part for flavor. Classic biltong must contain coriander and black pepper. There's no way around it. With duck biltong, we've tried an unbelievable amount of combinations and settled on something very simple. Dried garlic really kicks up the umami flavor. It's a bit technical and I won't get into it, but it really makes a huge difference.
It's science.
Lastly, we have sweet smoked paprika. The combination of coriander, pepper, garlic and smoked paprika might seem extremely simple. It's not about the fanciness or amounts, but rather the specific combination of flavors that allows the main product, in this case duck, to be the star of the show. Guaranteed you've never tasted anything like this. To bring the magic out of the coriander, we roast it in a dry pan. Any pan will do, but cast iron is my personal favorite because of the heat transfer and retention. Once it starts to smoke slightly, remove it from the heat and keep toasting until it's nice and fragrant. Use your smell here to judge the doneness. You'll know when it's ready or if you're about to cry. Once fragrant and toasted, you want to blend it or grind it, or, God forbid, chop it. Let it cool down first, otherwise you lose a lot of the aroma to the ozone. This is a little coffee blender. Works great and even the dude under the bridge has one, only not for coriander or coffee. If you don't have one, you get your blade out and you start showing us your knife skills. Don't blend it too fine, pulse it until you have a kind of mix between coarse powder and flakes. I leave the pepper untoasted for flavor and aroma. Give it a blend and stop just before it's completely fine. Add the pepper to the coriander, as well as the anti-Dracula powder and stoned paprika. Give it a mix and set aside. After 30 minutes on the skin side, flip the boobies over and cure for another 30 minutes, skin up. The salt draws out moisture and it creates somewhat of a brine, and we want to make sure the brining happens evenly. Let's talk wet cure. We keep it simple as this has the least impact on the flavor, but it's important for making it safe to eat. Vinegar. This is non-negotiable and use whatever vinegar you have. If you're interested, this is apple cider vinegar. I like to balance the sour with a little bit of sweetness, in the form of natural honey. This is buckwheat honey, which adds some nuance, but use whatever you have. Finally, we have Worcestershire, or wash your sister sauce. It's optional but extremely necessary. Mix the honey with the vinegar. Give it a helping finger if it's resisting. Add the wussy sauce and mix to combine. By now these titties should look slightly more shriveled up than an hour ago. It should have released quite a bit of juice and the flesh color will be brighter. Not all the salt would have dissolved because the brine is saturated and won't take any more salt. Get rid of the excess salt. Simply rub it off with a paper towel or your hands. Don't wash it under water. Get the duck into a container where it fits snugly and add the marinade. You can also use a Ziploc bag for this. Move it around and let it set at room temperature for 1 hour, turning every 15 minutes to evenly cure. Next, you spread your spice mix onto a tray for the all-important spicing step to follow. Lay a load of paper towel or the clean towels your wife just washed onto the table to dry your duck. This is an important step, so don't skip it. Get the breast into the spice and you heavily pack it in. You're gonna do this a few times, flipping and flopping until the breasts are fully covered in spice. I like to let it sit for 5 minutes after the first go, then come back and spice it again. It simply makes more spice stick to the meat. To dry these, we can either hang it onto non-reactive meat hooks or paper clips, like plastic or stainless steel. Don't use anything else. If it's aluminum or steel, it will rust and it'll give it a weird taste to where the metal was attached. And also, cut your time with us short. Don't do it. If you don't have hooks, then just pierce a hole and tie some string through it. Now ideally we need to weigh these to judge doneness. Of course, if you've made biltong before, you can easily skip this as you already know how it feels when it's cured to your liking. For most of you, a cheap dehydrator will be the best method to use for drying. It ticks a lot of boxes where biltong boxes fail. Let's do a quick comparison. You'll have biltong ready in 3 days. It's compact for easy storage. You can handle humid climates. It's budget friendly. There's no need to build your own custom box, and you can use it for other purposes. The downside is that it has a slightly higher minimum temperature. Some models can be noisy, and it requires flipping the meat twice a day to ensure even curing. The good thing about biltong boxes is it dries at a lower temperature. The bad, it's tricky to find or make. It could potentially be a very costly project. It's bulky and difficult to store, especially if you live in a small apartment. It's also prone to mold in humid climates, and you can pretty much only use it for drying meat. I personally use a purpose-built fridge or dehydrator. If you don't have a dehydrator or you don't want to spend money on one, then you can simply dry this in your fridge. Fridges are fantastic at drying out food. Just hang it up so there's plenty of free space around and put a tray underneath to catch any spices or juices falling. You can also hang it close to a radiator if you don't have pets and live in a drier climate. If you don't have a radiator but a dry climate, then hang it wherever you want. Making sure it is well ventilated and slightly breezy always helps. It might take longer, but you'll have biltong at some point anyway. Back to the dehydrator, and I get many questions about this one. Firstly, you switch it on. Make sure the temperature is set to a minimum, which is usually about 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit in the cheaper models. Don't set a timer or anything like that, as it will reset the temp and cook your meat. Make sure the meat is well spaced out and let it cure. I also use a cheap thermometer to check the temperature, especially with the cheaper models. This one costed like 15 bucks, so don't expect it to hold the temperature within a degree. Every day I flip the duck twice to make sure it dries properly. After 2 days, you weigh it. You want to aim for 50% weight loss. Once done, I like to vacuum seal it and leave it in the fridge for a few days before eating. This evens out the moisture and also matures the flavor and texture. If you don't have a cheap backpack like this, then simply place it in the fridge for a few days, tightly wrapped in plastic wrap. It will last for about a month in the fridge, and it can also be frozen for longer storage. If at any point you find mold growing, make sure to rub it off with vinegar. Increase the airflow and reduce the humidity somehow. Let me know how it goes and I want to see your results, okay?